We are live. Okay, it's given me the song. I'll start playing it.
Okay, he's joining.
I think you'll be coming.
I remember and celebrate the lives of Zambia's unsung heroes. I remember Robinson Puta, Titus Mukupo, Lawrence Katilongu, Michael Chileshi, Patu Sumoko, Timimvula, Teddy Chilambe, Spox Chola, Brian Chwangu, Godfrey Chitala, Alex Chola, and the unnamed mothers, daughters, and sisters that have inspired us all for the greater good of this country. So hear me out.
Hello?
We are live. We are live.
We are live. Can you folks hear me?
Yes.
I can hear you. Okay.
I've forgotten again. No. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, the echo is gone now.
Ladies and gentlemen, wherever you're watching us all over the world, welcome to this special edition of TVBakwetu Business Talk. I am your presenter, Patrick Chilufya. I'm currently sitting in Sussex, United Kingdom, and I've got two special guests here. Mr. Nason Bimbe is also from Sussex, United Kingdom, and Mr. Chasaya Sichilima is from Canada. I'll allow them to introduce themselves at a later stage, but let me just introduce the topic of our show. Some of you, you've already seen the topic, and you might be wondering how come business talk, business show is talking about politics. As you know, politicians are very important. Without politicians, without good political leaders or visionary leadership, business cannot develop, jobs cannot be created. They are the ones who create an enabling environment for business to flourish. But then today, we are not just talking about politicians, we are talking about a special politician. who is the current president of the Republic of Zambia, Mr. His Excellence President HH Akainde Ichilema. So today we've got an hypothetical question. What will be HH's political legacy will look like after he finishes his probably 2 terms? And a lot of you will be asking, legacy, what is legacy? And what do you mean by political legacy? In recent usage, political leaders are said to be concerned with their legacies, their historical significant achievements of their tenure in office. So before I dig into what we're going to talk about today, let me just introduce my two guests. Mr. Bimbe, can you please introduce yourself? Mr. Bimbe, you muted. Can you unmute yourself?
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chilufya, for having me on your show. And thank you very much to everyone, and hope you're going to enjoy. I wish also to thank all your viewers. And yes, we've got a packed show. Hope we'll do justice to the topic that Mr. Chilufya has put across.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bimbe. Can you just tell the audience what your profession is or what you do?
Um, I'm, I'm a trained computer scientist and software engineer. I've worked in IT in the UK through doing all sorts of things. That's the complete life cycle of systems development. But currently, more into digital, what we call digital knowledge. Having worked at the Institute of Development Studies, it's more to do with what we call the nexus between research and policy. So we kind of are looking at how do we make that information, how do we get the research to find itself into policy, and what are the tools that we need to use to do that, and how do we encourage the practitioners to take up that supply of literature or what we call research. So that's my area right now.
Thank you so much. Now I'm gonna ask Mr. Chasaya Sichilima. Just tell us about yourself, what you do, bef- before we get into the nitty gritties.
Thank you, TVBakwetu, for the opportunity, and thank you, Patrick, for having me once again. My background is geologist, geochemist, and then computer scientist at the same time. I also sing. I'm very passionate about the arts, and my um, everyday vocation is to advocate for diaspora engagement with Zambia. And that's a brief context. But also currently, I'm very much into data science, Python development. So looking forward to the day when I can have some of those applications back home in Zambia.
That was fantastic. Just a disclaimer to our viewers, and especially to those economists who will be listening to our program. None of us, the three of us, is an economist. I'm an accountant. Currently, I'm into financial management and control. And you can see my other two guests are computer scientists. So we'll talk about economics, but just at the surface. We're not going to go into detail so that we start arguing with the economist. All what we are trying to say is, what should HH do, or what other leaders who have legacies have done that would make HH to have a legacy once he leaves power. So we're gonna talk about some of the things. We'll just be debating. There will be no right and wrong and right answer. Yeah, but at the end of the day, you understand why we brought up this topic. Yeah. So we'll start by talking Zambia now as the eighth president, who is HH, since independence. In discussing this topic, we'll look at a summary of the eight presidents that this country has had. So I'll start with Kaunda. Um, Kenneth Kaunda fought and led the independence struggle for our country, nationalized the major industries, brought in one party state. So I think what I'm going to be doing here, I'll be asking you guys questions. Anything you can add on the legacy of Kaunda? Mr. Bimbe, just one point or two. Or is that legacy the best legacy for him?
I think that one of the best legacy for I mean KK is
Kaunda.
the Pan Africanism, the fight for the liberation of the African countries, especially in southern Africa. So what comes to mind is Zimbabwe, current Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Angola, Namibia, and South Africa. So that was probably one of the best legacies. However, there are debates of whether the others were okay, considering, I mean, we had humanism.
Mm.
The concept was good, but whether that helped our country, I mean, the jury is out there.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Before I say anything, you are my guests. So you're the ones who'll be saying anything. So I don't want to be quick. I'll bring Mr. Sichilima to just comment on Kaunda. No, before we this is just an introduction. So we have to be quick and get into the real issues.
I suppose for me, one of the things or tenets that stand out about Kaunda's legacy is free education. I am beneficiary of that. And through that, he was able to educate a nation and also set the stage for the development of the country. And one hopes that the future leaders will look into that education is an equalizer.
That was fantastic. I'll just add. Actually one of the best legacies I think for Kaunda to myself is free education. Some of us we won't be here. Uh, Somebody is saying there's no sound. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. The audience, are you hearing me? Is there sound? Can you please comment before we continue? Anyway, let's continue. So free education to me is one of the legacies Kaunda is that stands out. As Chasaya said, it's education is an equalizer. Some of us won't be here if it wasn't for free education that Kaunda introduced. And then the other thing I think that stands out with Kaunda was unity. You know, when we grew up, I grew up in the mines, and they were all tribes. And on my left there was a Kaonde, a Bemba, and a Tonga, and we never even knew that they were tribes because it was one Zambia, one nation. So to me, those two things stands out more. Okay, guys, let's move on. Our second president, Frederick Chiluba, contributed to the ushering of the multi-party um, um, system, liberalized the Zambian economy, a whiff of corruption. That's a very interesting one. I'll start with Mr. Chasaya. What can you say about Chiluba, especially the last one, the whiff of corruption? Is that a legacy?
It's actually a sad one. I think towards he started very well. As you have rightly mentioned, he was part of the movement that brought about multi-party politics, a fierce trade unionist, always fighting for workers' rights. And
Mm,
so his reign, he started very well, introduced market economics, and what that did was open up the country to new investments. And there's still debate on that because some of the steps that they took, like privatization of the existing industries, was not done perceivably in a way that brought benefit to the country. There's debate on that. I think that on corruption, there are allegations, and today they are not. Some of them have not been proven. Uh, uh, I think again that was towards is another story. So there have been allegations, some of them not proven, and so but the cloud hangs out there that he was quite, in his last term of office, he was quite uh, corrupt, and then also was pushing for what is now known as in our country the third term, which Zambians abhorred. Um,
Mm.
Having said that, I think that what he did also was to open Zambians to think about owning property. He sold council houses. Again, there's debate on how best it should have been done, but what that did was to open Zambians up to thinking about owning property and improving houses. And generally, he also ushered in at least a movement to help the transport sector, which at that time had collapsed. So if you see UBZ, there was Mulungush investments that the unique government then had put into everything. But once Chiluba came into power, he opened that up so that a lot of people got into transport as a business, and transport was well lessened. Because I remember when I was quite young, you would have to fight to get into a minibus to go to Kanseshi. But he opened that up, and yeah. So I think that aspect of entrepreneurship can largely be attributed to the MMD and Chiluba.
That's fantastic. Mr. Bimbe, what's your take on uh, uh, Dr. Frederick Titus Chiluba? May his soul rest in peace, and also Dr. Kaunda, may his soul rest in peace.
Uh,
So on Dr. Chiluba.
for me, I think Mr. Chasaya has summed it very well. He did bring out the liberalization of the economy, what we know now. Today in Zambia, we have millionaires. It's because of those policies that started.
Mm.
Mr. Chasai also discussed the privatization. Personally, I am of the view that business should be run by private sector, but it's arguable whether the process or the modalities of the privatization was done properly. I mean, there is literature out there uh, which has discussed these issues further. So, yeah, to me, I remember him that, and also Mr. Chesaya brought up a very good thing. It's more economical independence for the citizens.
Mm.
During the one-party state, it was very difficult for people to acquire wealth. But
Mm.
with the MMD coming in, that was opened up, and also, the country was opened up to the rest of the world, basically.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. To me, liberalization comes tops, and also there was visionary leadership in that government. But as Mr. Chasaya alluded, the first 5 years was fantastic. The second 5 years made some of us leave Zambia. I think MMD became so corrupt, even worse than the UNIP government we suspected were corrupt. And yeah, so uh, and I compare that MMD government, the caliber of that government, to this government, the current government, and I pray that this government won't change after 5 years like the MMD government. Yeah. Okay, guys, let's move on. Patrick Levy Mwanawasa, may his soul rest in peace. That's our third president. Just few points about Patrick Levy Mwanawasa. Got the HIPC program, debt forgiven, and Zambia became a middle income country by 20, was it 2008 or yeah, 2008, I think. Uh, a semblance of normality in terms of rule of law, fight against corruption. I'll start with you, Mr. Chasaya.
Uh, Thank you for that. I think I do recall Mwanawasa's reign coming in at a time of controversy, but he worked hard to rebuild bridges and also gain the people's trust, such that by the time he died, he was quite popular among the citizenry. He had made sure that there was no cadarism. He told, he
Mm,
frankly said, if you're caught, doing this, you're on your own. And
mm,
yeah, so typically he also fought against corruption. Um, and also one of the things that I do recall him very being strong about is just that he did not. Uh, the image that he portrayed was one of the president who was hardworking,
mm,
who cared very little about what others said. I mean, if you recall, he was popularly called by our late President Sata that he was a cabbage, but he used that uh, to flip it around, that I'm not cabbage, I'm steak. And I think his actions, what he did, bringing Zambia to, Zambia was now recording positive gains in terms of GDP annually. The economy was growing, so he left the economy the very sound principles.
that's fantastic, Mr. Chasaya. I won't say anything until my other guests talk, or else I'll be in trouble. Mr. Bimbe, please talk quickly before I come in.
Yeah, yes. I think, as you have alluded to, the last 5 years of Chiluba reign, you know, um, made the country go a little bit downwards. And the coming of Mwanawasa, I think things opened up. Things, as we say, there was a bit of normalcy into the country. Um, you could, see things improving. He was a disciplinarian. He fought against corruption. But again, maybe the approach wasn't done very well. But I mean, it's all the same. Whenever corruption is being fought, there is this idea of
Mm,
political persecution. Uh,
mm,
but maybe the approach at that time, which kind of differs from the approach right now, because it went into a criminal process rather than a civil one, and also it started from the top rather than from the bottom. So that could have hindered the whole fight. But the key point is the hippie completion point. Although it started earlier, and thank you to other stakeholders like the Jubilee 2000, JCTR, and others. Um, uh, Zambia was forgiven, and we started on a clean slate. And from there on, Zambia could access capital markets for loans. And that's what came about as the building blocks. So, yes, Mwanawasa was kind of a stable hand at that point.
I think you guys have mentioned very important things about Mwanawasa. I was a lover of Mwanawasa. We called him Ichibumba. You know, you know, just like Chiluba, I loved Chiluba so much. Maybe because they are both from Undola, and I was in Indola. And Mwanawasa corruption, to me, he was sincere about fighting corruption. But I think the strategy was a bit wasn't very good, because it is claimed that though we prosecuted so many people, we never recovered so much. We actually spent so much money, especially on the Nchitos. They became so rich, and the government, didn't get much, didn't recover much. Then the other thing, Mwanawasa worked with Mangande. I think one of the respected finance ministers of our generation. Very strong fiscal and monetary policies, controls, low inflation. Zambia became a middle income country. The kwacha, if you guys can agree with me, under Mwanawasa was one of the best performing currencies, if not in the whole world. I think it was five kwacha to a dollar. something like that. But the Mwanawasa legacy is debatable. A lot of people says that all these fundamentals, in place and everything, we became hippic, but the poverty was still there. So all those fundamentals, in low inflation and everything, is debated that they were not translated, into real jobs, food to the poor. But anyway, let's move on. We cannot keep on debating on that. Our fourth president, Mr. May you so rest in peace, Mr. Rupiah Banda, former, popularly known as RB. Other people call him Mr. Nyamasoya. May he so rest in peace. Not so much, but was a steady hand to maintain the status quo, navigated the 2008 financial crisis, a whiff of corruption. Mr. Chasaya, quick comments on that.
Arabi, I think first of all, he was a people's person, genuinely warm, somebody warm you met and liked. So he had that connection with the grassroots. Um, Unfortunately, I think one of the things that came up during his reign was cadreism, where MMD people just cadres just became a law unto themselves. And again, there were allegations of corruption where some of even his children were deemed to be very much in almost every government project or deals, and one of them left the country when governments changed. But having said that, I think what to me comes out is under his reign also, he really still continued the path of economic growth from Mwanawasa. And you've rightly mentioned he actually steered the country under from the 2008 economic meltdown that was there. So in terms of economics, I mean, he just continued where Mwanawasa had left off. I mean, the economy was doing well, very well, but there were again, allegations of corruption, which ultimately put a tinge on his legacy.
Okay, that's fantastic, Mr. Bimbe. What's your say about late
Mm.
Rupiah Banda?
Yeah, I think as Mr. Chasaya said, yeah, he was a steady hand. He was a statesman, I think, having been a very astute diplomat. And can you remember he was also briefly president of Namibia one stage? So he knew the politics. He was not offensive. He was a people person. He embraced everybody. I think the biggest kudos for me is navigating the 2008 financial crisis. I mean, a lot of countries suffered, and Zambia we
Mm,
managed to weather that one. Of course, there were allegations of corruption, and
mm,
yeah, a lot of contracts and dodgy contracts were
mm,
unearthed. And then, if you look at the campaign he launched, that was the one of the biggest campaigns Zambia's ever had,
mm,
and then you wonder where all the money came from.
mm.
So that could be one of his downfall. And yes, and also Kadarism started rearing its ugly head during his reign.
I think on Banda, I think I don't want to add on the positives. You guys have stated clearly the positives, but one of the positives, Mr. Chasaya would agree with me. Most of the presidents were against um, 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 were against due citizenship or even recognizing the diaspora. But under Rupiah Banda, maybe because he was a diplomat, he started the process of due citizenship. But unfortunately, he died before it could be implemented. Then the other thing for sure, uh, though it's debatable, is corruption. As we are talking, some of his children are not in the country. They've run away to South Africa. So, and that's one of the reasons people. I wasn't in Zambia, but most of the people who voted against him, they said one of the reasons we voted against him was corruption. They said corruption reached a pandemic level, an alarming level, such that Zambia has never experienced. So I don't know about that, but it's debatable. Yeah. So let's move on to Michael Chilufya Sata. May his soul rest in peace. Yeah. Populist politics and started creating the debt. Mr. Chasaya, what can you add on that? It was a short reign.
Yes, it was a short reign, but I think people credit him for having fought at the time the MMD, which seemed like a juggernaut that could not get out of power. Um,
Mm.
I think Mr. Bimbe has talked about the campaign, how expensive that campaign was. But despite that, he was able to engage himself and engage the people that they could vote for him. He started off very ambitious. I think that largely the infrastructure that is there that was built in years after, or the whole plan was initiated by him. But having said that, he had a very different view about the diaspora, and so the diaspora process or dual citizenship stopped under his reign. So that's one of the negatives that, in my opinion. Having said that, he was a man of the people. It's unfortunate that when he just started, when he took over the reins of power, he became unwell, and so we didn't get to see how him complete his term. Again, one of the positives, again, is debatable, is about him creating districts. The only sad thing is there doesn't seem to be a well thought out plan in creating these districts. Even today, some of them don't have any infrastructure at all, apart from just being named.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Mr. Chasaya. Mr. Bimbe,
Uh,
Mr. Michael Chilufya Sata.
yes, I mean, he was a charismatic fella. He really wanted the presidency. And I think at his age, I think he could have left a very, very strong legacy had he focused on the fundamentals that were built by the MMD. These are, the ability to acquire funding, which went into infrastructure development. Of course, there were, it's still debatable whether that was done properly, whether there were proper plans on how to do things, or whether it was haphazard. My only negative is the populist politics, which, I mean, they resonate with the grassroots, yes, but then they don't create the environment that will generate what we want, a more improved and sustainable livelihood for the people. And I believe that should be the goal. Although infrastructure as code development, I would argue that because infrastructure should be an input to the bigger development, which is improved people's livelihood. So, and yes, and the debt creation was started during his reign. I wish he had lived longer. Maybe we wouldn't have had seen the destruction that happened to our country.
That was fantastic. You've said very important points, both of you. But one of the things I noticed about legacy I would give to Sata was he's one of those people who never gave up. Despite losing so many times, he kept on fighting. That tenacity, and also he was the people's president. I was told by one of the people who worked with Michael Sata that just like Chiluba, he had some days where he said, I just want Banamaliketi, Banani, Bakabova to come to the office so I talk to them so that I know what is happening on the ground. To me, that's a legacy. A president. talking to marketeers at State House, even having a meal with them. You know, So to me that was his legacy, and also you guys alluded to the debt that he started acquiring to improve infrastructure. I think maybe had he lived longer, there wouldn't have there would have been that invasion of PF by MMD, and brought back that corruption that was in the MMD. Anyway, that's also debatable. Oh, let's move on to one of the I think this one I love it. Edgar Chagwa Lungu is still alive. His legacy is still in contention. However, we can say he was involved in infrastructure development, still debatable, breakdown of rule of law, corruption, indebtedness, financial mismanagement of the economy. I don't know where I'm going to start with Mr. Bimbe.
This one, to be honest, I don't have a positive, really positive thing to say. As I say, unprecedented infrastructure development, fine. I am of the view that infrastructure development, as I said earlier, is just an input to the actual human development. Development has to be about the people.
Mm,
Am I able to send my child to school? Am I able to eat tomorrow? Am I able to find medicine? The buildings are part of that fabric that brings that. Coupled with that, the need to be peace in the country. The need
mm,
to be unity. All that, I think, broke down under his reign. And, you had a situation where one hand was doing one thing, the other one didn't know what to do. For example, Honorable Minister Ngandubualia was in, is it Washington,
mm.
to IMF, and then someone in the ministry, one of the ministry, was announcing a big loan. So I think it was a chaotic kind of government. There was really no direction at the end of the day. Probably that's what caused all the problems for him.
Okay, Mr. Chasaya, I could see you are itching to talk on this one.
I think I could spend the whole hour, but I dare not. you know, um, in my view, I think it just started from the way he came into power, using pretty typically force or brute force. At the Mulungu conference where he won by a show of hands. I mean, there's a background to that, and what started then on just set off the trajectory of how the country was run. It was order or running by power. You either agreed with them, and if you didn't, you were treated in a way that is just not right, which in my view was not the Zambian way. And I do recall at times thinking, is this the country that that I grew up in? The Zambian spirit was gone because cadres were the order of the day. They became more powerful than the police. They could do anything. Mr. Bimbe has alluded to the debt that he accumulated infrastructure, but at what cost? And the point I think
Mm,
is that actually infrastructure should be
mm,
part of a bigger plan that allows my mother or my grandmother in Shangombo to put food on the table. Allows my uncle in Kawe to take his child to school, and also allows those my cousins in Nakonde to have access to medical care where they can go to clinics and find medicine and find health practitioners. And the list can go on. But there was just a general total breakdown of the law, and people couldn't even speak. And
oh,
so, having said that, I mean, the list is long, but having said that, I think for me, one of the positives that uh, his legacy is that he actually presided over the introduction of dual citizenship. And he, unlike the previous president, President Sata, was for the idea of incorporating all Zambians, the diaspora included. And so now we have the dual citizenship. So that to me is his legacy. I think he did very well on that. Others, as I said, I could go on. It's a litany of a lot of things.
Oh my God, Lungu's government. Oh my God, to me, I would say chaotic. Uh, Chimbwe, no plan. No coordination. This one will be saying this, the other one will be saying that. There was just confusion. Infrastructure development, that's what they talk about. But then you guys, your IT guys, and I'm an accountant, even economists, they talk about cost and benefit analysis. At what at who benefited in that? Because the prices, they were overinflated. The prices of those infrastructure. An example is the Ndola Lusaka Ndola Due Carriageway at 1.2 billion, which this government has cancelled it, and then they have reissued the tender to two tenderers at a much lower cost. So imagine we would have incurred 1.2 billion at whose cost? The Zambians, because whatever excess they were going to share to each other, and Zambians were going to suffer. And thank God that this government is gone. But you guys, you're both IT experts, and we are jumping into HH slowly, and this is where I'm going. The kind of money they spend on infrastructure development, nobody thought about internet, internet infrastructure and connectivity, which is very, very important. So you guys, do you what do you think this government should do? And don't you think if HH improves internet connectivity and infrastructure in Zambia, becomes cheaper, available, fast internet, could that be HH's legacy after 10 years? Because most of the presidents have failed to do that. Over to you, Mr. Chasaya.
Yes, that to me, I totally agree with you. The point you make that yes, they talked about infrastructure, which is just roads, but what about the other type of infrastructure? So ICT infrastructure. So I think it was a missed opportunity. I do recall, for instance, that the then mayor of Lusaka, Mr. Miles Sampa, at the time, one of his campaign promises was to provide free Wi-Fi to the citizens of Lusaka. How he was going to do that, nobody knows, but time has proven that it's something he could never achieve, I guess, even on his own, because it has to be a well thought out plan throughout the country. When you talk of free Wi-Fi, it's something that should really every citizen. And I know our country is developing, so on one hand, we cannot compare much to how we live here. But I think it's a start. Other African countries are doing it, and we have to find a way in Zambia that works for us. But certainly, if you talk of internet infrastructure, even the cost, because maybe again, just to break it down, for instance, just the cost of airtime is an issue. You have right now, and I think the COVID situation proved that because we had to be in lockdown. Even people in Zambia, Lunza was closed, so the alternative suggested was, for students to learn online. Now, if you think of my cousin in Mongo who doesn't have internet access, or even if he has, the cost of, they call them bundles, that's huge, and so that's very limiting. Only very few could access, and then even the cost of accessing the speeds, it's a whole different thing. And now, Mr. Bimbe can allude to this. He has developed applications that run thousands of transactions. The kind of infrastructure right now that we have cannot sustain that, and so we're actually limping. And I do hope that if the government can, or since we're speaking about the president himself, his legacy, if he can approach that with a well thought out plan to improve the ICTC infrastructure, that should be a lasting legacy that people remember him by. Because what it will mean is, the guy on the streets can afford more bundles, they can watch or access internet, they can learn online. Because now you can actually learn online. I think they're all these little things that don't seem much to people in the Western world. But I think if we translate them to our people on the ground, because everybody needs to learn, we all want to learn. So that will be allow people in Mbala to learn on their own. So my appeal, and if he's listening, is to look at that so that it becomes one of his main goals. Even as, for instance, he's talked about employing, which is done actually, is delivered the employment of teachers, health workers. So in my view, if there's something that would stand out as these legacies, they actually change the infrastructure, and in doing that, it will also change the outlook of Zambia in terms of ICT.
That's fantastic, Mr. Chasaya. Mr. Bimbe, before you chip in, this government, we're talking about ITC infrastructure. This government has got a technology ministry. So, so which means they've got some plans, short term, long term. So 10 years would be about probably medium long term. If HH achieves that, improve internet, it becomes connectivity, bundles become cheaper. Most of the houses can afford broadband, fast broadband, at least 4G in the next 5-10 years. Do you think that will be his legacy? Or what do you think he should do in this regard for it to be called a legacy for him?
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, this is a topic to my heart. Um, today's world, every company for it to thrive, to innovate, and even governments, they have to be a digital organization. You have to be a knowledge um, economy at the end of the day. So the way to look at it is ICT and digital in its form should be a cross-cutting infrastructure. The reason is coordination is easier. Uh, Delivery of services, efficiencies are there. Even in roads or bridges, you could use digital to make sure the bridges you know, can self-diagnose and call out if they are in distress without sending people all the time to monitor that. So that's all digital. Data is important. Without data, you cannot make decisions. How you process data is also important. So it's for the government now to start liberating that data to allow citizens to build services on top of that data as well. Connectivity is important. It will be cheaper for government to interact with its citizens if there is connectivity, affordable connectivity. You cannot run a business on bundles, surely. So there ought to be something. So to me, whatever area they will be looking at, I've been looking at the eighth national development plan, although the ICT is in there, but I feel ICT should be embedded in all the other aspects of what they want to achieve.
I think that's fantastic. You guys, I'm not even gonna say anything here. You've nailed it. It's your area of expertise. And I totally agree with you. If HH does some good job here with Mr. Mutati there, it would definitely be his lasting legacy. And then before we move on to other questions, there's another thing that was promised by most of the presidents, the last 7 presidents or so, except Kaunda, because Kaunda didn't want this. He wanted dictatorship or one party democracy. But from Chiluba, especially Sata, may his soul rest in peace. said once in power, he was going to enact what is known as the Freedom of Information Bill or Act, which is very important in in a democracy and development of any country, because the government is put to task. People can check if, say, HH travels to the United Nations, you know, on that trip. I can write to Minister of Finance and say, please, can you tell me how much HH spent? Itemize it. Within, say, 40 days or so, they should be able to respond to me. So I will start with Mr. Chasaya. So if that bill is implemented, because I spoke to one of the senior UPND ministers or members, and they said that bill is on the tables. It might be enacted under this government. Would that be a legacy for HH? Over to you, Bachasa. And why do you think it's important to enact the Freedom of Information Act or bill?
Oh, for sure. That's big. What the FOI bill will do is make everybody in the know. So what do I mean everybody in the know? So civil servants, all these projects, ministers, all basically it brings about a level of accountability even after the fact. So for instance, if there was a project that was initiated by government, they've spent so much money, you can actually go back even years after to look at how that project was managed, what was involved, or the players involved. It actually also, in my view, would be a deterrent against corruption, because right now we've got no way, or like some of the things that government does, and I do agree there has to be some level of confidentiality. But things that affect us, the common people, decisions are made on our behalf that we don't know. And speaking of that, I do have to give credit to the current government for publishing the the contents of the IMF, so that we are not kept guessing. But that is the kind of thing that citizens in Kaputa, in Mbala, they need to have access to information. If somebody tells them, a hospital was built, and some of these announcements they're made in parliament. So a person in Kaputa has got no way of confirming that actually a hospital was built in Kaputa. I mean, we're now seeing recently the cases of universities that were supposedly built in Wapula and Kasama. Right? So, and politicians would go on an ante and say, we are doing this, we are opening this particular university or building a health center here. But there's no way of counter checking them until we wait for the auditor's report, until you wait for parliamentary reports. And it shouldn't be like that. So that's part of the advantage that freedom of information bill will bring about, is that it will allow the citizens, it will allow NGOs, civic society to check facts, to follow up on issues, projects, and any other concerns that they might have, without necessarily having to wait for somebody to announce somewhere and believe him or her. And for me, that's one of the advantages. It would be very huge. I mean, somebody in Shesheke can go and demand, well, there was mention in parliament about a clinic being built in my area. There was a mention of a school being built in my area. What is happening? And they can follow up and not wait for their MP and not wait for anybody else to tell them basically lies. And so it will really be fundamental, even how people are treated. I think it should also touch on people in prisons, like all those things. If you want access to information, it will really help bring a level of accountability, and also make people on the other side be aware that whatever I do can actually be checked by citizens. And if I am not able to answer properly, I may be in trouble or should be called to account, which is what we need right now.
That's fantastic, Mr. Chasaya. Mr. Bimbe, you're on the spotlight.
Yeah. I'll talk about this topic on two levels. I think FOI will bring about good stewardship of data, and that data will also play another role in terms of service delivery and whatever. At the same time, as citizens, we're supposed to know what the police are holding, what information they hold against you. Zicta today collects a lot of information on citizens, and citizens don't know what sort of information they hold against them. So this will bring about that. From the government side, they also have to look at it. There will be certain information that people should ask for. For example, we've been running around grade 12 certificates and all that kind of thing. It should be easy for someone to just ask whatever body to say, can I know the qualification for this person? It should be easier that way. On the other hand, I think the government can be proactive as well to make available such information without being forced to produce it. It's just good governance. There is the concept of open government, which has been implemented in most developed countries, which makes available that information easily. I would also want to probably aid the government as they implement the eighth National Development Plan to create publicly accessible dashboards. Because what is happening right now is the government is always on the back foot because of so much misinformation coming out of the opposition. But if there will be citizens, citizens are not dull. They can read, give them everything, pamphlets, reams and reams of data. They will be able to read through and understand what's going on. But the dashboard, just a clear view of what's going on, gives the citizen, that visibility of where, the government is going. Are we, hurtling really nicely towards our point of arrival, which, as I said earlier, is, creating improved and sustainable livelihood for the people. So we need to have that kind of visibility of what's going on. Currently, we don't. So in the eighth National Development Plan, there is monitoring this. There is a passage which talks about use of data, collecting of data, process, but it doesn't talk about what sort of data will be available for citizens without really requesting it. I think I would urge the government to think through that. Every government in the Western world, you can go to the government website and get whatever information you want. And you can also do your own budgets. You can do your own, modeling to see whether the government's policy on a particular issue is actually based on sound analysis of the data available. So that is important.
That's fantastic, Mr. Bimbe. The other day, I was looking everywhere on the internet just to find the speech of our president, the last parliament speech, only to find it at parliament website. So I think, Mr. Bimbe, you're right what you're talking about. And I can see indeed, if President HH and his Minister of Justice, Mr. Mulambo Haimbe, sends this bill to Parliament and it goes through, enacted, I think this will be one of the best legacies of HH. Is undebatable. Okay, we're moving within time. I've got some 4 questions or so to go, and I think we're gonna move quickly. The first question, this is HH's legacy, and I'm gonna pose to you guys each. So, so what do you think would be HH's political legacy once he leaves office? We've got the talking points. Just list top three, for example. I'll start with Mr. Chasaya.
I know we cannot look into the future, but can certainly predict. Your
Yes,
idea. For me, just you talked about three,
only three.
three,
Top three.
top
That
three.
if he achieves this,
Yeah,
that will be his legacy.
I think the one for me top of mind is just that he's brought sanity and order
That's
And I'm
fantastic.
sure if 10 years down the line, we may even forget what disorder looks like. So that's something we should not forget. That's, for me, that's top of mind. There's no cadarism, and if there are elements of cadarism, they are being addressed. They're being told you're on your own. So just for people to be in that state where actually you're not being watched, you can walk freely. A woman can dress anyway, where any regarding without being undressed, like what used to happen in the past if they were met on the streets. Uh, that's huge. It's been huge. I mean, you can hear people back home just commenting about the sense of relief. It's now a year, and they've actually seen the difference that change actually does work. Two, I'm hoping that by then he will have had a handle on the date situation, which he has now managed to, with the IMF program, to find means of restructuring. So we hope 10 years from now, if he's given another term, that his legacy will be that he was able to get the country back on its firm footing and provide a pathway towards debt sustainability, and also in a way that released resources so that the average person in Chingola can have access to proper health care. They can have access to medicines. Like my grandfather in Kanyama can have access to health facilities that they don't have to know somebody at UTH to go. Right now there's quite a strain on our healthcare system. If you hear the stories, they don't seem to change. I know Rome was not built in a day, but if you can address healthcare infrastructure, building cancer centers, at least provincial wise, because that's really a big deal. And so that you lessen pressure on UTH and Lusaka, that people can access facilities, be it CT scans in provincial centers, and then you extend that. So for me, there's already order. Two, there's sustainability, and three, if you can sort out the healthcare conundrum, that would be huge.
That's fantastic. Which means HH has got a huge opportunity to make one of the biggest legacies of all presidents that has ruled Zambia. Uh, Bimbe, three things, three top things.
Mm. Interesting.
What would HH legacy look like if he achieves those top three things in your mind?
I think to put it plainly, if he can achieve just even half of what they've said they will need to achieve within the eighth and national development plan, that would be
Hmm.
awesome.
What are some of those things?
So those are things like economic transformation and job creation,
Mm-hmm.
environmental sustainability, good governance, human and social development. So
Mm.
among those, of course, you've got water, sanitation, hygiene. If that can be improved, nutrition is important as well. Skills development, which we've seen with the free education coming on board. So that is going well. But the biggest of all is stabilizing the economy and also uh, just bringing the rule of law. But the constitution as well, constitutionally needs to be looked at. I think we've seen in the past few days is the problems with what we have currently. So I think that needs to be looked at. There is talk about that in the speech where it's looking to abolish the death penalty, which we know was already on the cards. But there is an interesting one, kind of removing the defamation for the president, of the president, which is another. But there are a lot of those kind of things that need to be. But on the economic front, I think we are on the trajectory. If that can be done, that would be great. The biggest one I would say also is just sustaining, improving the democratic institutions. We can't always be looking to have a good leader. We can't afford that. So what we need is, if the democratic institutions, the law enforcement are strengthened such that everyone knows. Can you imagine if President Trump was an African president with our West democratic, institutions, what would have happened? So Because of those things, they manage to curtail certain behaviors. I think we need to have that so that every individual, every leader respects that, and there are sanctions if you break anything. So that to me is probably my number one should be that.
Mr. Bimbe, before I forget, if I'm quoting you properly, you're saying we don't need a good president. We need good institutions. Is that what you said? Can you
That's
just
exactly,
can you just elaborate on that?
exactly what I've said, and I think uh, President Obama mentioned the same thing at the AU one time. You don't need a strong man; you just need strong institutions because they do the checks, they do everything, and everybody respects that. It's not about one person. And I think if we look at the discourse, our discourse, the political discourse currently in the country, everyone is saying, oh, the president should release Monetery, or the president should do that. That shouldn't really happen. We shouldn't even be entertaining that. But it's the perception. Whether it happens, I don't know. But it's something that really we need to strengthen that kind of thing. We can't have politicians, controlling the police. If there's an emergency, it's the police's job. They're supposed to issue statements and whatever, not politicians. Everybody, is appreciative of that. The judiciary also plays a good role. I think that is the basis for also development, actually.
That's fantastic, Mr. Mr. Bimbe. We'll come back to some of those points, but let's go through the most important questions here. The next question I'll ask my panel is, but we'll talk about stabilizing the micro fundamentals. How will this look like, Mr. Bimbe? That's your question.
I think we
Who-
are
who- who-
already
who-
I think we are already seeing that. It's just unfortunately, again, it had to take the president to mention some of these figures, which should be public knowledge. For example, uh, we were coming from an economic growth of minus 2.8,
Mm,
which was at 6% some time back. But when the PF left, it was minus 2%. Today,
mm,
we are projecting it to go up by 4%. Uh, when we look at inflation, when the new government came in to 25.6%, today it's 9.8%, which is going into the right trajectory of the target of 6.8%. Import cover was less than the recommended 3 months. Today it's at 3.7%. So we are moving towards, and then the discussion on the debt restructuring is also happening thanks to the IMF deal. And I know a lot of people are just looking at the 1.3 or 1.4 billion, but that's not the case. We are looking at the credibility that the actual deal brings for us to be able to deal with the debt and be respectable again. So that is happening, and because of that, it is happening right now. I'm learning that certain prices are coming down, which will be okay. The other thing is, today if someone has 1,000 kwacha, I think it's worth more than it was 1 year ago in dollar terms. So that will create a good environment for for both local and foreign investment to have that confidence to put money into production. The government is not going to be stifling the local uh, credit markets, so companies will be getting money to improve their operations, thereby employing more of our people. So that is happening, and I think we are moving in the right direction.
That's fantastic. But Chasaya, what's your comment on that?
Uh, I'll just make a comment on Brother Bimbe about the stable exchange rate. That the question, I mean, the question now is
Mm,
more valuable than it was 1 year ago. But
yeah.
at the cost of the diaspora. So today it is Shania.
Yes.
But it's a good thing. It actually is a good thing. It shows that you get what you ask for. So it says a good change, and so
Mhm.
certainly the signs are there. The stability is there. I mean, again, I stand to be corrected. Maybe someone can remind me. In my few years on it, I haven't heard of a time when prices were coming down in Zambia. So it's a first for me. Maybe I need to be corrected. I don't want to sound like I'm, blowing over the top, but it's just a fact. And I think we need to sort of recognize it. Is it a fact? Is it not? If it is, then it's a good thing. The big thing that you mentioned also is the fact that I think now there's going to be a sense of stability to plan for the business people to plan, and prices also, given the inflation rate, is now low digits, single digits, sorry, means that prices are not increasing as frequently as they used to. I mean, if you have 22%, that's something else. So it definitely uh, is a sign of good things to come. And one hopes that we continue here on from here, despite what we're hearing also that the IMF program might do. And we're still yet to hear what the impact of that will be or see. I mean, I've just seen, I think there was an article just 2 days ago about the fact that I think the government will stop. They gave a particular incentive to the oil marketing companies for the importation of fuel, so they're going to stop that particular component. I think that will mean price increases. I stand to be corrected, but and people are saying again it's part of the wider IMF program. So my hope is that even as some of these decisions are made, that ultimately, I think hard times are coming, but the ride won't be as bumpy as it was if nothing had been done the way we're going under the PEF. So I'm looking up. I think we have got technocrats in the Ministry of Finance and all these other ministries who can look at it and feel that hopefully they can look at the impact of this on the average Zambian. We have
Mm,
cousins, we have nieces, nephews, our uncles, that there's a bearing that should be born, all this FISP. I think the citizens, they're always I've forgotten that there's subsidies that is given to the less fortunate in rural areas in town. So I think
Social cash transfer.
yeah, social cost transfer. Yes, yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, so those should increase or at least remain stable and be looked at. Even the criteria widen because certainly our people are still reeling from the effects of the last 7 years.
Yeah, and guess what? This is where again, when we're talking about IT, that comes in because such subsidies are targeted. And now, if you don't have the right data,
Yes.
the administering of that
Yes.
subsidy or
Yes.
that help can be very, very expensive. But if you have the data, the right data, it becomes much easier, much effective. So I hope the government will be moving as they learn, as they expand that, they collect as much data and make it really usable.
So that's fantastic. You guys, both mentioned about social cash transfer now, CDF. Uh, just a small question. Do you think because previous governments they failed to there was so much corruption, there was so much red tape, there was so much bureaucracy. Even the CDF, there is some administrative um, issues here and there. And also, the previous governments, when people got the money similar to CDF loans, or where they were given that money, they were supposed to pay back. They didn't pay back. Do you think if UPND government, you know, like what Chasaya said, manages these social cash transfer CDF, And would you think it will be a good legacy for HH and his government, uh, Mr. Bimbe?
Yes, it will be. And
Especially, especially that people who borrow the money,
yeah,
they'll start paying back so that they can lend it to other people.
it's
Go
just like
on.
CEEC and Development Bank of Zambia.
Yeah.
And guess what? The policies are there, the rules are there, but it's just impunity of just ignoring everything. So we're coming back to the same thing: strong institutions, respect for the rule of law. I think that's what is going to be there, and also how to disperse that money. Also, I think they've got processes, they've got rules. Who can access what? But again, there were loopholes, there were made shortcuts than overlooking those rules. So that is what is needed. It was a question of enforcement rather than lacking proper rules. So I believe this government, with their mantra of prudence, fiscal discipline, I think they'll really enforce those rules, properly tighten where they see there can be loopholes.
But Chasaya, have you got anything to say before we move on?
Of course, I think for me, I would add that I think it also seems to be, I don't know whether it's a mental thing or a cultural thing about being, if you borrow, then you have to pay back so the other person can borrow. But I think there's been a lapse, and I don't know whether it's cultural, but I think in general, it's something that we have to learn. When you talk about DBZ, I mean, the issues didn't start even 7 years ago. They've been there from as far back as I can recall. I think from the MMD regime, there are always scandals about people getting loans, even buying equipment or vehicles for stuff that was, they didn't apply for, and getting away with it. But also I do know there were genuine cases where somebody just didn't know or had the acumen to run a particular business, but they were given money and they end up not being able to use it wisely. So there is that side, but I think there's also an aspect of just not being used to paying back. And I think we have to examine ourselves as Zambians. I mean, myself included, like what kind of culture is this that says you can get something but not feel that you have to pay back? If you don't, it means it affects the next person, or your children, or somebody's child, an opportunity. So I think on a personal level, I think it's something we have to self-examine ourselves. It's something that's been there before, way before this government, way before the PF government. I think on a cultural side, it's something we'll have to look into within ourselves.
That's fantastic. So in a nutshell, stable physical and monetary policies, if they continue the way they are, I know Kwacha improving, inflation going down. I think this is what is going to be one of HH's legacies. At the moment, the Kwacha is one of the best performing currency in the world, in the whole world. And then the CDF, I agree with you guys, is a game changer. Properly managed data, people pay back the money, and imagine if from 1.6 million to 20 something million, uh, was it one? Was it 1.6 million dollars? As a game changer, and that can be HH's legacy, because if it's properly managed, the next 10 years it will create a lot of jobs, a lot of self-employed people, and a lot of people will benefit from that, because the people who've been given the money will pay back, and then it will be lent to other people. Let's move on, guys. The next question is, I do remember one of the ministers, what was one of my best ministers in MMD government, late Ronald Penza, then Minister of Finance, saying it's not the job of the government to do business, but to provide an enabling environment. this sentiment is back again. In terms of HH's legacy, can you unpack the enabling environment? I'll start with Mr. Bimbe.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Um, I just wish to also say personally, I also believe it's not the job of government to run business. Government is the most wasteful and an efficient machine that you can ever have. So I'm not a fan of parastatal companies. If
So
I
are you
just bring
saying,
you,
let me just hold that piece. I want you to answer this together. So are you saying the IDC should be scrapped?
I think it should be looked at.
Or continue now.
Yeah, yeah. Because I mean, if you look around, even in developing countries, the UK being the case, when private companies are doing well, everybody is happy because they get their dividend. Immediately, there is a little problem. The union will come in and say, let's privatize, let's nationalize, and whatever. The case of the rail industry, the utilities in the UK. So that's a problem. However, I think an enabling environment to me is reducing the cost of doing business. The government providing that base where, I mean, they've already started within the government cutting down on some of the license fees which were unnecessary. Of course, there ought to be IP rights, property rights needs to be respected. The courts needs to be, respected as educators. If, I have a problem, it's not a question of if somebody puts in money, then another person wakes up the next day and say, I'm taking over this company. That should be a thing of the past. So those are the kind of enabling, reducing the red tape. Within these, say, licensing authorities, I mean, there's a lot of red tape. Zambia, I believe, has got more licenses to just open up something, starting a business. So those kind of things needs to be looked at. And also the investment rules, I think they need to also be looked at because they seem to tilt towards a foreign investor than a local investor. So clearing all that. But of course, some of them would need change in legislation, in some of them. So those are kind of things that an enabling environment would provide. Banks can become more innovative in creating products. Even for us in diaspora, I've heard that, they've started like mortgages, financial products for diaspora. So that kind of environment that is opened up gives these organizations, that freedom, that confidence that they can create more value, and therefore that value is passed on to citizens. So that to me is good, and it is happening. I mean, we've got the rule of law, no cadres, everybody's that's respecting the exchange rate is getting better. The money markets should be more funds for the private sector. So that is coming up. But I think the government machinery needs to really be agile, so that it responds to some of these things, rather than, you go to the office, come tomorrow, come tomorrow, come tomorrow. It shouldn't be like that. Again, digital can play a very important role in that. There's no need for someone in Kasama to travel to Lusaka to just get a title deed. What for? It should be done from there. So it's those kind of little things that, and also probably create some sort of a one-stop shop that any investor could go to and get all the things that they need. So that efficiency, which is basically the cost of doing business. So that probably a lot of stuff.
Mr. Bimbe, why are you still there before I bring in Mr. Chasaya? The cost of doing business. involves also interest rates. Currently, the interest rates are very high. So, do you think if this government, by the time they will be leaving government, the interest rates will be low, say single digit, they are in double digit numbers? Will that be a legacy? And the other thing is, there's so many leakages in our economy. And you also mentioned that it favors the foreigners. They can take as much money out of the economy. Will that be HH's legacy if he deals with that?
Yeah. Um, I think on the last question, we have to be careful how we craft such things, not to scare away investors or something like that. It has to be a win-win for both the country and the investor. I mean,
Mm,
there are special there are tools that people use, like PPP, private public initiatives. They can drive that. But what I really meant was, sometimes you find that a foreign investor might be allowed to acquire land easily than probably a local investor in that terms. So it's kind of trying to level the playing field so that everyone can compete on that level. That's probably what I'll look at. Interest rates is also a good thing, and I think with the stabilization of the macroeconomic fundamentals, that would improve. Because one of the things what was happening was the government was actually hoovering a lot of money out of the system to fund its own operations, thereby leaving very little money to go to businesses. And usually banks would rather lend to the government because they know they're going to get back their money, even if it takes time. So, so that crowding out of the private sector from participating in the credit market would actually improve with the stabilization of the economy. That, in effect, will reduce the interest rates. Yes.
fantastic. Mr. Chasaya, we're talking about enabling environment, which was coined by Ronald Benza.
Yeah, so I would just take a stab at my brother Bimbe. That unlike him, I do believe there's still room for parastatals. Uh, so, but I think I do agree with him. Certainly, the way parastatals have been run because of the political influence has really not endeared them to everyone, and those who have seen the results. So maybe there could be a way that I still do believe in Zamtel, by the way. So I think what has destroyed most of our parastatals is the political influence, and that they pander to. I do know even here in Canada there are actually some corporations owned by the government, and they function very well. So that's just I'm picking a fight with him. But having said that, I totally do agree about having an enabling environment, because what that does is, first of all, I think the start has been made. There is order now. You don't have to think about how safe your investment is. I mean, I can speak for even for myself. There were things you wanted to do at home, but because of the lawlessness, we were being held back and said, well, let's see. I mean, you can't invest in an environment of uncertainty where tomorrow something may happen to your farm or your business or your plot, right? So that's really the starting point. Order, because what order does bring about is predictability. You'll be able to assume that in 5 months, if I make a plan, I should be able to have these returns without any form of interference. And any investor, even a business person, even a small scale farmer or the marketeer, who sell vegetables on the streets, they should be able to be in a position that if I go to Kamwala or Soweto market tomorrow, I'll go and sell without being interfered with, which was the case. People could not sell their products from their farms properly. There were always these middlemen who would take much of that income. So what enabling environment means is it brings order, and what order does is then allows people to function and make predictive decisions on their businesses or other activities. An enabling environment also allows people to innovate because you're free. You're free to debate. You're free to debate ideas. You're free to think of things that have not been thought before without fearing or that the idea will be will require for you to be connected to somebody in government to make that facilitation. And so an enabling environment allows you also to just, even for you as customers, to be in a position to say, okay, these services that we want, we can actually predict that we'll have this service for this particular time without any sense of interference. So an enabling environment just allows, it's a free space for people to do things they're thinking about in their minds, things that services that they can buy in a way that allows them to freely do so. And out of that comes development ultimately.
Sorry, I was mute. That's fantastic to you. Okay. Can you hear me properly?
Yeah, we can hear you now. I can hear
Okay,
you.
there was an echo somewhere. Okay, let's move to the last question. Um, you you mentioned about Mr. Bimbe. You mentioned about creating uh, and sustaining democratic institutions. Can you just elaborate on this one, please? I'll start with you, Mr. Bimbe.
Yeah. So this is one of the biggest problems in most um, uh, developing countries is chaos, basically, so to speak. It doesn't look like a banana republic type of chaos, but there is this little chaos where once citizens stop trusting in those institutions, then you have a serious problem. People can take the law in their own hands. I'm happy to see that within one of the pillars in the eighth National Development Plan uh, speaks to that, which is under good governance. So it talks about constitutionalism. So having proper constitution that makes sense. Obviously, the rule of law. They also talk about human rights, and within that framework, there is also international cooperation and relationship. So they all follow through the whole thing. We need to be able to trust our courts. We need to be able to trust our police. We need to be able to trust our parliament. Everything needs to be just there. So that's to me is the most important thing. So I hope once the constitution is sorted out, and things will start getting into place, then we will be moving towards that.
So to you, that would be one of HH's legacy if he does that. If he creates and sustain democratic institutions. And
The civil society also needs to be strengthened. I think we need to relook at what was the motivation of certain laws that were passed on the registration of those, how to manage those civil societies, because they are good part of the democratic space. Then we've got also the media as well, needs to be improved. I think I've got a problem with most of the media in the country at the moment. They seem to be, they lack depth in whatever they report on. You can't enjoy reading something. There's no even opinion pieces. They're just all over. So I think that needs to be improved as well, but it also talks to skills and training, and the same thing we talked about, the FOI, that maybe would help the journalists to be more factual and truthful in the way they report things, even if bad or good.
That's fantastic. Chasaya, creating and sustaining democratic institutions, would that be HH's legacy?
My hope is that it will, and you know, it should. Certainly, we have seen a case where institutions in Zambia have pandered a lot to the executive, and one hopes that the independence will be very, very apparent. And I mean, I can give an example. I mean, we are all aware, citizens are aware, some of the decisions that the Concords made were, I mean, they were baffling. They defied logic. And and you could clearly see that there was an invisible hand with some of the decisions that were happening. I think people are smart. They can see when something does not look right and something is predictable. Some of the decisions were very predictable. So one hopes that there will be clear separation between the judiciary, the executive, and National Assembly and Parliament, and it will be indeed as well, not just that it's on paper, but it should actually be seen. And one looks and hopes that judgments coming out of whether it's the Supreme Court or the Concord will be such that it will have the support of citizens as well, even if they say, well, we don't agree with this, but we certainly do know the decision behind it and the reasoning behind it. So that's really my hope, that institutions are strong and they're not fearful. And I don't know whether it has to do with the security of tenure. I'm not sure, but that's something that can be looked at.
Yeah, Mr. Chasaya, that was fantastic. Why are you still there? We finished our question. We might look at questions from the viewers. But why are you still there? One of the even every citizen talks about that. The UK, it might not be the best example. They don't have a written constitution, but they've got the common law. They use precedences, and there's no chaos. But when it comes to Zambia, those lacunas, it's unbelievable. Don't you think um, constitutional reforms remove those lacunas in our constitution in HH in HH's tenure of power? If he achieved that, would that be his legacy?
I'm hoping it is. And Patrick, I can just add the fact that I think the intent behind the law is something that we've been missing a lot. For instance, I can give an example of the third term, the fight against it. The law against a president having two terms came about because it was believed one should not stay too long, right? So the intent of the framers of the constitution was such that we won't allow anybody to go beyond two terms, because obviously you're in power for 10 years, you get used, and there's just a whole um, couch that's around somebody being in a position for too long. That's why if it's at work, you move to a new position so you can get energized, look new challenges. But in those political positions, because of the perks that they come with, the influence that they come with, you find somebody after 10 years has developed into somebody you hardly recognize. So there has to be intent, right from the get-go. And I do hope that if there's intention, uh, good intentions actually, because they all start with good intentions, and then if they can go through with the execution, I certainly do hope that President Hichilema will go down as somebody who respected the law, changed the law for the better good of other people, not just for himself, because it's really, these laws should be made for everyone else, not just to protect yourself. Because I mean, as it is, we've also seen how laws created to protect those in power have come to bite them. So it's never good. I mean, politicians should learn from history. It's a very good predictor. So my
Mm.
hope is that the president can address the constitutional lacunas that make it decisions acceptable and predictable by all. So certainly that would be one of his legacies, that he provided and changed the constitution for the betterment of all and for future generations of our country. Because this constitutional talk, I mean, we're still talking about it. Like it just, at some point, it should stop.
Mm. That's fantastic, Mr. Bimbe. Before one of our viewers or our we've got somebody here. Joseph Nyundu is our regular person here. You ask you guys some questions, but Mr. Bimbe, you muted by the way. Well, do you think removing those lacunas in our constitution will will give a good legacy to HH if this happens during this his tenure?
Yes, I think it is a must. They really need to look at it. But again, as Zambia has experienced with constitutional making, it's always driven. There's a lot of suspicion around it and those sort of things. But I think with goodwill, I think we should come up with a very simple, straightforward constitution that any person like me who is not a lawyer should be able to understand. We can't just, cheapen ourselves to just go into the court to distinguish between disqualification and nullification, something that is already in the dictionary.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yes.
That's quite pathetic.
Yes.
When the intention was they ought to be, you did wrong, you've got to get punished.
Yes.
It's as simple as that. So it's those kind of things. And also, as they do make a constitution, you cannot really legislate for every eventuality. We need a constitution that can really stand the time. You look at great constitutions, the American one. They just build on top of that. So that's what it is, because we all know, what we understand today, what will be different in, say, 6 months, 10 years time. Technology will change, the way drugs will change, food production will change. You can't legislate on all that, but the intent, as Mr. Chasaya said, is very, very important. So once you follow that, then any subsidiary law you create, at least you know that the intent is still there. So that's probably my take on that one.
So you're saying when we reform the constitution or an article in the constitution, we just building up on what is already there. The intent should remain the same, isn't
Exactly.
it?
Exactly. For example, if we talk about food production, the intent should be, all food should be fit for human consumption, for example.
Mm.
So if new technology comes in, genetic modification, whatever, you can allow, provided that intent is still there.
The intent is still the same.
So it's
Mr. Bimbe, why are we still there? The Some people were making fun of the constitutional court. They were saying their judgment does not make common sense. One of them was saying it's like they were comparing Malanji and this is public news. Malanji and Mr. Lusambo. An example was somebody has been fired at work for misconduct or using a fraudulent certificate to get a job. So they are fired, and then the employer has to re-advertise that job and employ somebody. You tell me Lusambo and Malanji would apply for that job, because that's what people are saying. So
exactly,
which means even the common man knows that there's something wrong in our constitution. Somebody
exactly,
who has caused a by-election with misconduct, without a grade 12 certificate. So if he produced one, which means that certificate was illegal,
yeah,
and it should be followed up by the enforcement units. So how can he go, and is he going to produce another one, another certificate which he didn't produce in court?
yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Again, as we Mr. Jasiah said, it's the intent. Why would you know you were found to wanting, and then suddenly you want to get back? I mean, it's just it just defies logic. You broke the law. You've got to be punished. You've got to take that. And it's there. You can't stand for this parliament. That's probably the sanction. But then if the sanction is not there, then what's the point of the law?
Yes, what's the point?
Yeah, part of the constitution, I think it's Article 72 something 4. It says whoever causes a by-election cannot stand. And then there is another one which talks about nullification and disqualification. So it doesn't, there is confusion.
Yeah, exactly. That's where the problem is.
So the judge is gonna pick the latter one, which suits his situation there.
Yeah.
And now you start defining what is nullification and what is disqualification.
Exactly.
Instead of looking at the intent is you've caused the by-election, you cannot stand, period.
Exactly. And again, going into the semantics of it causing a by-election, the fact of the matter is simple. You were found wanting.
Wanting.
Yeah, there was corruption, alleged, whatever. I mean, we can talk about it. Yes, there was corruption, there was violence, because that's what the court said, and that's what the Constitutional Court said. So where is the sanction?
Where's the sanction?
That's where my problem is. There ought to be sanctions. But if then you're going to go around without getting those sanctions, then what's the point of having gone through all that process?
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Bimbe. Now we've got that time where somebody can ask you a question. Joseph, Mr. Joseph Nyundu, were you following the topic today? You are muted.
Mic was off. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes.
Yeah, did
Yes,
you follow
yeah,
did you follow our topic today?
Yes, I picked up a little bit from I think when you started speaking about constitutional amendment.
Yeah, yeah. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
It seems to be breaking.
Yeah, you're breaking, Joseph. Hello.
You hear?
Is on a bad connection.
In a bad connection. I'm gonna remove him, and then he might come back again. I'm gonna kick him out, and then maybe he might come back. Yeah. Before he comes back, he might come back and ask. Any closing remarks, Mr. Chasaya?
Well, my gratitude to TVBakwetu for bringing me, to have a conversation with people here in the diaspora, and those have a conversation with people back home. It's always good to engage and share ideas. So as much as we've been talking, we're also learning from each other, and hopefully in that we're also educating other people and giving them things to think about, and the government, or institutions who can listen, some ideas to think about. And I always enjoy coming to your program. So thank you. And also it's been fun, sharing time with my brother. So I think we should talk more about him. We're birds of the same feather.
Yeah, fantastic.
Thank you very much. I think we should introduce an ICT component of the discussion.
I think so.
Yeah.
That's fantastic, Mr. Bimbe. Any closing remarks? It looks like our man has come. You can do the wait a minute. Maybe he might ask a question, and then we can combine. Joseph, can you hear me now?
Yes, Mr. Chilufya, I can hear you.
The subject today or topic was, what will HH's political legacy look like? So it was an hypothetical question. So we were debating some of the things that HH should do as done that will give him a lasting legacy. So if you've got a question to my two guests, you can ask them, or you can make a comment.
Yes.
If you don't have a question.
Yeah, I'll make a summarical comment since you are almost leaving. Good evening, everyone, and the viewers. Thank you. Yeah, I think it's quite clearly seen by everyone that there has been certain social, economic, and political changes that have occurred in the last 1 year, such as the issue of cadreism, which was a prevailing problem which everybody wondered why it never ended, and just by pronouncement it is coming to an end, or I would say it's been contained, although there's been rumors of people speculating that some portions of society are still having, but I think on a large scale there's political will to end cadreism, and it has trickled down to the sites where it was happening a lot. And the another issue is the economy starting to grow. I think I remember at the time of election, our GDP was even in negative figures. It was undefined. We are now looking at it from around 2 to 3%, if I'm not mistaken. Our import cover was way below 6 weeks. We are looking at around 3 months. And our kwacha is steadily and gradually come down to an exchange rate to a dollar, which is at least defined. And I'm seeing some price commodities coming down relatively in being posted over social media, as well as the interest rates. I think Standard Chartered Bank brought down from 28 to 23%, and the IMF having come in to give a deal for the SDR, which was signed soon after the elections. Though that's quite another big topic that needs another day. But I think the credit profile of Zambia to borrow on the credible market has been restored going forward. Though on that part, I feel it's not just the government having signed that deal. I think this is where the citizens have to now take part in the economy to grow the GDP, because it's not just signing with IMF and getting that package over the years agreed. I think the main people, the main players that are going to grow the GDP are the citizens to get involved. And I think I've always said before that CDF is quite a unique model that will actually compete with the banks, because CDF is the model that the government has introduced is simply a lending facility that the government has put parallel to the banking sector. So people will be able to access capital in their local constituencies without, to push money away from the capital and let the economy grow itself from local activities. But what we need on that part is innovation, because nowadays we are competing in an innovative world. So we can't have an economy of cross-border trade where people just order things from Nakonde, from India, from China. We are still promoting jobs in other countries. So we need to be innovative ourselves to create local manufacturing, local products that our citizens use, our regional market, and expanding into Africa and the rest of the world. And I think the president has deliberately brought these benchmarks, which I've mentioned before, such as like the opening of the nickel mining, that it will trigger our engineers to explore their expertise in green economy, in manufacturing electrical vehicle related products and other equipment. And the free education as well is another milestone that I think the president will leave a legacy on the social sector, because if you look at the basic qualification of being an MP in Zambia, it's a grade 12 certificate. So if you can provide free education up to grade 12, you are creating a benchmark of the leadership that you require to go to parliament. So by definition, the political space is being given an expanded pool of intellectuals that they can at least have. I'm sure by the next 10 years, a grade 12 certificate will no longer be a constitutional court case as it is now, which is something you've discussed alongside here, which is very surprising that in the year 2022, when people are making COVID vaccine, we should be arguing about who doesn't have a grade 12 certificate. It's relatively such a drawback in our development agenda, because we are discussing trivial things that are making headline, that are not adding value to the economy. They're actually wasting the court's time. We should right now, our court cases should be handling, contractual agreements, this company has not done well with us in this economy. Now we are dealing with look at what is prevailing right now, which I'm coming to, which I think was the last thing I heard you discuss, the issue of the constitution and the judgments. I think on the matter of the constitution myself, I would say we have to look at the history of how did we end up having this constitution that we have, because this constitution is not a homegrown document. It was given to the first president from Lancaster House here in England as a Schedule 2 of Chapter 65 of the Royal British Charter, and we tried to amend it through the Mwanakatwe, the Mungomba commissions until we got to the 96 and 2016. We've only had two major amendments to the Constitution. And if you look at the processes that we have arrived at to have this Constitution, that is causing a lot of confusion right now as we speak. We know very well that any lawyer who know, or anybody who know from civic education, that we just need 3 basic principles to arrive at a constitution: wide consultation, consensus, as well as what's the third one? So you have wide consultation, you have consensus, and your inclusiveness. These are the 3 principles to arrive at a constitution. But look at how dubious the processes have been, both the 96 and the 2016 amendment. Look at even the Bill 10, how hot it became. There was an issue of the Siavonga agreement. There was no inclusiveness. There was no constituent assembly. So we haven't made our own homegrown constitution, which speaks to our traditions, it speaks to our way of life, it speaks to who we are as Zambians, as Africa, and as a country that we want to be. That's why we end up having a situation where we have to go and have the court tell us the meaning of a nullification from a disqualification. For me, even if that answer was given, it's irrelevant to what's going on, because the article that pertains to this issue is very clear in Article 72, which I actually have it right here with me. Article 72 clearly states in the number 2 that the office of an MP becomes vacant if, and it has the H clause, which says a member is disqualified as a decision of the Constitutional Court. So what was the decision of the Constitutional Court? The Constitutional Court decided to uphold the judgment of the High Court. It agreed with the High Court. So it made that decision to uphold that judgment of the High Court. It ends there. Now, the Constitution can't remain silent. It had to provide a remedy for punishing that person that caused that vacancy, because that person is disqualified from Parliament in clause H because that person has caused the vacancy. So for causing that vacancy in the same term of office, the Constitution is punishing you to wait until 2026 not to contest in this election, which comes to clause 4, section 4, which now tells you that you, the person that has caused the vacancy in this term of office, in that Parliament, you are not eligible to stand in this term of office. It is very clear. It is all there in Article 72, 2, H, and 4 as a summary to now create a remedy. But I think where the confusion has come in is because the clause H uses the word disqualified as a result of the decision of the High Court. And that is where people are relating that word disqualified to the future election. The Constitution is not talking about the future election. It's talking about you are disqualified from Parliament. You've caused that vacancy as a result of the decision the High Court made, which was to uphold the decision of the Constitutional Court made a decision to uphold the judgment of the High Court. So everything is very clear. So even to go to court and seek interpretation between the nullification and disqualification, I don't see the use to the case, because the court does not nullify the seat. The court nullifies the election, and then that nullification causes automatically a vacancy because the process you arrive to be an MP has been squashed off. It is void. So therefore, if you tell me, because I wrote my exam fraudulently and my employment has been terminated, it means I lose all the benefits. I no longer hold the office. So that office now becomes vacant. And I have created that vacancy because I'm directly involved in the misconduct that has created my disqualification of my position. So going forward, there has to be a law that now has to guide whether I can reapply in that job or not, which is what the Constitution does in the Section 4, to make sure that the person who has created that vacancy does not participate in parliamentary proceedings between now and the next 2026 election. It is there in the Constitution. That's not even my opinion. It's what is written in that document, which they amended themselves in 2016. And they said they did it with eyes closed in the whole of that stadium. We all watched it. They were in power. The UPND was in opposition. Every other party was in opposition. So I don't see how this becomes even the issue of the ruling party or anybody. It's them that created this law. So now it has come back. Even the Article 52 that they're trying to use, Article 52.6, it doesn't talk about to file a nomination again if you caused the vacancy. Even if the person resigned or withdrew, whichever, because I'm seeing now there's another issue of, or the person didn't say, I withdrew. He wrote that he resigned. Even if he wrote that he withdrew, that does not guarantee that the other two people that caused that vacancy should stand. Because the High Court ruling did not interpret the three questions. It interpreted the difference between the qualification and nullification. So I'm still here surprised how there's confidence that they can stand again when Section 4 does not allow them. They caused this vacancy. So I would like to understand that I think we have reached a point where we are now using human beings to kind of start mutilating the very constitution that we put across for ourselves. And that, to me, is very, very dangerous as a people, because we'll start arguing the constitution using courts, and then we'll end up creating many precedences that will end up calling lacunas when actually there were no lacunas. For me, I don't even see a lacuna here. The constitution has given all the provisions in Article 72 clearly in how you end up being punished for causing the vacancy. So all the sectors going around, I'm not understanding. These things are they straightforward in the constitution? I don't know if by line of understanding the way everything was written there is different, but I think it's clear. The framers of the constitution were very clever in that Section 4. If you saw from 72, they say office of a member of parliament. Then they'll say in H is disqualified if the member, as a result of the decision of the High Court. But when it comes to Section 4, it uses a person, because the framers didn't want to say the MP, because they are referring to you as an individual. If you are directly found capable of causing that vacancy, it is or the onus is on you to take responsibility. It same as in Article 106, which was the issue of the Lungu case. Wherever you find the issue of eligibility, it will not use the office; it will use a person. Even in the 2016 amendment in the issue of the presidential petition, the Constitution says a person who has twice held the office of president is not eligible. It doesn't say a president. Why? Because you, the person, you are the one who held the office. The office didn't hold itself. So equally in this section. So basically, I just thought to kind of expand the scope a little bit, because I seem to understand how the framers came about with these wordings to make sure that even from the prerequisite amendments to where we are, things are very clear. Where election is concerned, where holding office is concerned, where nullification is concerned, disqualification, and on the matter of disqualification as well. The Constitutional Court do not hold elections. So they were very careful, and they were even very considerate enough not to ban these guys right from the judgment. They even gave room for appeal. Because I think the Constitutional Court must be clapped for not having been so harsh. All they did is nullify the seat and then let the ECZ do the job. Because they knew that if they start ordering the ECZ, then they'll start dictating the ECZ instead of just answering the questions brought before them in court. And the court does not control institutions. It only interprets the law. And the rest of the institutions have their subsidiary bylaws and all legislations, including the Constitution. And the ECZ was, for me, they were in the right framework. They knew that there's a judgment from court. The seat has been nullified. How do we conduct a fresh election? We go to our electoral code of conduct. Then we also use the Constitution. So should there be anything telling us to say any one of these involved in this court process shouldn't stand, which was in Section 4, the ECZ just did the right thing. I don't see anything wrong. They followed Section 4.
That's fantastic, yeah. Joseph. Thank you so much for that contribution. But what we were talking about today was about should this government, uh, we were talking about constitutional reforms to remove some of these lacunas in the constitution, and also about should that be HH's legacy. So, Mr. Bimbe, what is your closing remark? Yeah,
Um, yeah,
having listened to Joseph and
thank you very much. Thank you, Joseph. I think you have elaborated the whole issue very well, and I just, I mean, I'm also baffled. I really don't understand, and even this one who is now resigned, I don't know where he's resigned from.
mm,
Another issue. I think such things. There should be sanctions for people that just drop out without a proper.
mm,
There is money going in printing, and all. There should be sanctions on that, and probably barring them for maybe 10 years or so.
mm,
That's my view. Otherwise, we'll just end up having a circus
mm.
over these things. Yeah, so thank you very much for having me on your program. And yeah, it was a pleasure uh, having Mr. Chasaya with me. I think I learned a lot. And I hope our listener, your viewers, have got something, one thing or two. Um, I think at the end of the day, I think uh, the final bit for this, whatever we've discussed, I think is more of creating a clear scorecard that we can judge um, the Hakainde Chilema reign to say, based on what we've seen, what the pronouncement and what we think the point of arrival is going to be, has this been done? So I hope it will give us a way of holding the government accountable in a way.
Fantastic, Mr. Bimbe, and thank you so much for coming. I can see Mr. Chasaya. Maybe he wants to say one or two words before we close. Any comment, about Chasaya?
Just to thank Joseph for providing insight and clarity on the issue we touched on. I know we touched on it, but it always adds you know a value when you get another perspective. So thank you, Joseph, for joining us. And once again, thanks my brother, Mr. Bimbe, and thank you, Patrick, for having me.
Thank thank you so much, Mr. Chasaya. Our viewers, thank you so much for your viewership wherever you're watching us all over the world. Thank you so much for my two guests, Mr. Chasaya, Mr. Bimbe, and also Joseph for his contribution. Um, I think from the topic today, I'm not going to make any comments here. You guys have really demonstrated, explained what should HH do to have that lasting legacy. And you've mentioned most of the important things that needs to be done, you know, for him to have that legacy. Some of that legacy is already there. There's never been a president who has created 30 something thousand jobs of teachers, 10,000 jobs of medical personnel within a year in government. So, you know, that's fantastic. But we are yet to see if most of those things HH has been talking about, especially the National Development Plan, Mr. Bibi alluded to, if some of those things are achieved, definitely HH will leave one of the most powerful legacies of all presidents that has ruled Zambia. Thank you so much for your viewership. May God bless Zambia. Good night and bye for now.
Thank you.